Can I talk to somebody in here tonight? Somebody who's been through the fire, somebody who's cried tears that nobody else saw. Somebody who's been wondering, Lord, where are you in all of this? Oh, I came to tell you, God has not abandoned you. He has not walked away from you. He has not forgotten your name, and he has not erased your future. No, no, no. The very fact that you're still breathing, the very fact that you're still standing is proof that his plan is still in motion. What the enemy meant for evil, God is turning for your good. So don't you dare give up now. Don't you dare throw in the towel, because the same God who brought you through before is the same God who's about to show you his glory again when it feels like heaven has gone quiet, when your prayers seem to bounce back from the ceiling unanswered. It is easy to assume that God has turned away. Silence can feel like abandonment. And in the human heart, silence often carries with it the sting of rejection. But the silence of God is not the absence of God. Silence does not mean he is not moving. It does not mean he has left you to face life's storms alone. In fact, many times the greatest work God does is performed in the silence behind the curtain, where your eyes cannot see and your ears cannot hear. Think of it like the midnight hour of a seed that has been buried beneath the soil. You cannot hear it cracking open. You cannot see the root pushing downward and the shoot rising upward. But just because you do not see the process does not mean the process is not taking place. There are seasons when God speaks loudly, when his voice is clear and his direction is unmistakable. But there are also seasons when heaven seems still, when your heart longs for an answer and all you hear is quiet. That quiet is not a punishment. It is a test of trust. It is God teaching you to lean on what he has already spoken rather than demanding a fresh word every day. When the teacher gives a test, the classroom is silent. That silence does not mean the teacher has abandoned the students. It means the teacher is watching to see what they will do with what they have already been taught. The same is true of God. His silence is often his way of strengthening you, proving that your faith is rooted not in feelings, but in truth. And many biblical heroes walked through seasons of divine silence. Joseph spent years in prison with no prophetic dream to sustain him. David spent long nights in caves, hunted by enemies, wondering if the throne God promised would ever be his. Even Jesus on the cross cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? And yet in each of these stories, silence was not abandonment. It was the womb of transformation, the hidden place where destiny was being prepared. Joseph came out of silence into a palace, and David came out of silence into a kingdom. Jesus came out of silence into resurrection. So when you cannot hear him, do not assume he is absent. And when your prayers seem unanswered, do not assume he has turned away. He is nearer than you think, moving in ways you cannot measure, aligning pieces you cannot yet see. Trusting God in his silence is one of the highest forms of faith. It is saying that even if I cannot hear you, I will trust that you hear me. Even if I cannot feel you, I will trust that you are still holding me. Every struggle you have faced, every tear you have cried, and every disappointment you have endured has not been wasted. The very pain that feels unbearable at times is often the tool God uses to shape your destiny. Pain, as difficult as it may be, becomes a teacher, and through its lessons, we are refined and equipped for greater things. Think about how gold is purified. It cannot shine in its purest form until it has gone through the fire. In the same way, your pain becomes the fire that purges impurities, builds endurance, and sharpens your character so that you can carry the weight of your purpose. When we are in the middle of the storm, we often ask God, why? Why did this have to happen? Why now? But later, when we look back, we see that what nearly broke us was the very thing that prepared us. Joseph's betrayal by his brothers seemed like cruel injustice, but without that betrayal, he would have never ended up in Egypt where his true purpose awaited. David's years of being overlooked and tending sheep in the wilderness looked like rejection, but those very years taught him how to fight lions and bears, preparing him for the day he would face Goliath. Every painful chapter of their story was not wasted time. It was training ground for destiny. Your pain is not random. It is not meaningless. It is strategic. God allows seasons of struggle to teach you things that comfort could never reveal. In seasons of blessing, you celebrate, but in seasons of pain, you grow. Pain forces you to pray when you might otherwise stay silent. Pain drives you to lean on God when your own strength fails. Pain makes you sensitive to the struggles of others, while birthing compassion and empathy within you. Without pain, your purpose would lack depth, but with it, your purpose carries weight, credibility, and power. Think about a woman in labor. The pain of childbirth is intense, but it is pain with a purpose. It is not suffering for nothing. It is producing new life. In the same way, the pain you are enduring now is laboring to birth something within you. What God has placed inside of you cannot be birthed without pressure, without stretching, without groaning. And while the pain is real, the outcome is worth it. Once the baby is born, the mother no longer focuses on the pain, but rejoices in the new life she holds. Likewise, once you step into your purpose, you will look back and realize that the pain was not punishment, it was preparation. God never wastes what you go through. He weaves it all into his plan, using the very thing the enemy tried to destroy you with as the very that equips you for your calling. That heartbreak that you thought would ruin you is the testimony that will help someone else find healing. That season of lack that you thought would crush you will give you compassion for those who struggle with less. And that rejection you endured is the reason you now have resilience to stand tall in the face of opposition. Every scar tells a story, and every story has the power to touch someone else's life. Waiting is one of the hardest parts of walking with God because our human nature craves quick answers and instant solutions. We live in a world that teaches us to expect everything on demand, yet God does not operate according to the speed of our culture. He works according to the wisdom of his eternal plan. What feels like a delay to you is often divine timing to him. Just because something has not happened yet does not mean it will never happen. A delay is not a denial. It is an opportunity for God to prepare you for what he has already prepared for you. Sometimes the only difference between now and the fulfillment of your promise is a season of waiting that shapes your character to match the weight of your calling. Consider the story of Abraham and Sarah. God promised them a child, but years went by with no fulfillment. The delay was agonizing, so much so that they tried to force the promise by creating their own solution through Hagar. But God had not denied them. He was aligning the timing so that when Isaac finally arrived, there would be no doubt that it was his doing and not human effort. The delay was not a sign of God's forgetfulness, but rather his desire to display his glory in the right season. If the promise had come too soon, it might have been mistaken for coincidence. By arriving in delay, it stood as a miracle. Think also of Lazarus. His sisters begged Jesus to come before their brother died. To them, Jesus' delay was devastating. They thought he had let them down. But what they called too late, he called right on time. By delaying his arrival, Jesus revealed his power in a greater way. He was not just a healer, he was the resurrection and the life. Had he come sooner, they would have only known him as the one who prevented death. By waiting, they experienced him as the one who conquered death. The delay expanded their understanding of his power. Waiting seasons refine us. They stretch our faith and for us to trust God beyond what we can see. If everything happened instantly, we would never learn endurance, and we would never develop patience, and we would never know the joy of seeing God's faithfulness come through after a long night of tears. Delay teaches us that his timing is not meant to frustrate us, but to protect us. Sometimes if he gave us what we asked for when we asked for it, we would not be ready to handle it. The blessing would overwhelm us instead of sustain us. God delays because he loves us too much to give us something prematurely. The farmer does not sow a seed one day and reap a harvest the next. There is always a season of waiting, watering, and nurturing before the fruit appears. If you dig up the seed too soon, you abort the harvest. Likewise, if you give up in the middle of your delay, you forfeit the promise God has already set in motion. The waiting may feel endless, but every moment is purposeful. He is aligning relationships, opening doors, and preparing opportunities behind the scenes. What looks like inactivity is divine choreography. So do not mistake his delay for denial. The God who promised is faithful to perform. His plan cannot be rushed and it cannot be stopped. While you are waiting, he is working. While you are weeping, he is weaving. The delay is not the end of the story, it is the middle of the miracle. The enemy is skilled at taking what is meant to bless you and twisting it in an attempt to break you. He takes opportunities and tries to turn them into obstacles. He takes relationships and tries to corrupt them into sources of pain. He takes seasons of growth and tries to poison them with discouragement. But what he never realizes is that God is sovereign over every move, and what the enemy intends for harm cannot override the divine plan of the Almighty. The very thing that was designed to destroy you becomes the very thing God uses to deliver you. The strategy of hell is always overruled by the wisdom of heaven. Look at Joseph's story again. Betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold as a slave, wrongfully accused and forgotten in a prison. Each of those moments was orchestrated by the enemy to derail his destiny. But when the dust settled, Joseph stood in Pharaoh's palace with authority over a nation, positioned to save the same brothers who had plotted his downfall. He declared with confidence, what you meant for evil, that God meant for good. The pit was a passage, the prison was preparation, and the pain was part of the process. None of it was wasted, and all of it was woven into a greater purpose. The cross itself is the ultimate testimony to this truth. The enemy thought he had won when Jesus was beaten, mocked, and nailed to wood. Darkness celebrated as the Son of God breathed his last. But what hell called victory, heaven called redemption. The cross was not defeat. It was the pathway to resurrection. The very act meant to end his mission became the foundation of salvation for all humanity. This is the pattern of God, to take the enemy's schemes and flip them into victory so complete that the enemy regrets ever trying in the first place. In your own life, you can probably look back and see moments that once felt unbearable, but now shine with meaning. And that betrayal that broke your heart taught you discernment and pushed you closer to God. And that financial struggle that kept you awake at night taught you how to depend on Jehovah Jireh, your provider. That sickness that drained your strength gave you compassion for others and a testimony of God's healing power. The enemy thought he was burying you, but he was really planting you. Out of the soil of sorrow comes the fruit of resilience, wisdom, and victory. God has a way of turning the tables so that the very weapon formed against you becomes a stepping stone to greater glory. Every plot of the enemy must ultimately serve the purpose of God. What tried to break you ends up building you. What tried to silence you ends up giving you a louder testimony. What tried to end you ends up elevating you. When you understand this truth, you stop fearing the attacks of the enemy because you realize that even his worst cannot cancel God's best. This is why you cannot give up in the middle of your struggle. If you quit while the enemy is working, you will never see how God flips the outcome. It is always darkest before the dawn, and it is often when the enemy's attacks seem the fiercest that God's breakthrough is the closest. Stand firm, because the pain you are experiencing today is the raw material for the purpose you will step into tomorrow. The devil does not have the final say. God does, and his word declares that all things, not some things, not a few things, but all things work together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. No matter what season you are in, no matter how dark the valley or how fierce the storm, the one unshakable truth you can hold on to is that God's presence is your guarantee of victory. You may lose friends along the way, you may lose opportunities, you may even lose battles, but you can never lose his presence. When he is with you, you are never truly outnumbered, never truly defeated, never truly abandoned. His presence is not just comfort for the journey, it is power for the fight. It is the assurance that the outcome has already been decided in your favor, even if the process feels uncertain. Think of Moses standing before the Red Sea with Pharaoh's army closing in. Everything in that moment screamed defeat. The people panicked, but God's presence was there in a cloud by day and fire by night. That presence was the difference between despair and deliverance. When Moses stretched out his staff, the sea parted, not because of his strength, but because the presence of God was backing him up. Without God, they would have been trapped. With God, they walked on dry ground. His presence guaranteed victory before they ever took the first step forward. Look at Joshua facing the walls of Jericho. To the natural eye, the city was impenetrable, but God had already promised the land, and his presence was with them. Instead of fighting with swords, they marched with obedience and lifted up a shout. When the presence of God filled that moment, the walls fell flat. It was not their strategy that won the battle. It was his presence. That same truth echoes in your life when God is with you. Obstacles fall, strongholds break, and walls that seem immovable collapse at the sound of your praise. David understood this deeply. As a shepherd boy facing Goliath, he did not boast in his sling or his stone. He boasted in the name of the Lord. He said, you come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty. The presence of God turned what should have been a mismatch into a miracle. Everyone else saw a boy against a giant, but heaven saw God against Goliath. And when God steps into the ring, the outcome is never in question. That same presence is with you right now, and it is the guarantee that whatever giant you are facing is already defeated. Even in the New Testament, when Paul and Silas were chained in a Philippian prison, it looked like the end of their ministry. But they began to sing at midnight, and as they worshiped, the presence of God filled that cell. Suddenly, chains fell off, doors swung open, and freedom erupted in a place meant for captivity. The presence of God shifted the entire atmosphere. What was designed to hold them became the platform for their testimony. That is what happens when you carry his presence. You cannot be held down by the same things that confine others, because where he is, freedom always follows. You may not always feel his presence, but his promise is that he will never leave you nor forsake you. His presence is not based on your emotions. It is based on his covenant. When you walk through fire, he is there, and the flames cannot consume you. When you pass through deep waters, he is there, and they cannot drown you. His presence surrounds you like a shield, goes before you as your guide, and then follows behind you as your rear guard. And that is why you can face tomorrow with confidence. You are not walking into the unknown alone. You are walking with the one who already holds the victory in his hands.